By the time Kang Min-jae reached for the gold wedding ring, his ex-wife was already 8 centimeters dilated, 38 weeks pregnant, alone behind a curtain of hospital glass, with 17 missed calls on a dead phone and 3 heartbeats crashing through her body like a punishment no one would witness. In the ballroom above the Han River, cameras flashed, Crystal trembled, and Seoul's most feared underworld heir prepared to marry the woman his mother had chosen for bloodline, reputation, and the illusion of stability. In the maternity ward across the city, Amara Johnson bit down on her own wrist to stop herself from screaming his name. Before dawn, 3 babies would be born, and Min-jae would learn too late that the heir his family had demanded had never been missing at all. Subscribe for more stories like this. It started hours earlier, with silk, diamonds, and obedience dressed up as destiny. Min-jae stood in a private room inside the Shinsong Hotel, his black suit cut to perfection, his expression carved into something colder than marble. Men twice his age lowered their eyes when he passed. Prosecutors feared him, rival crews paid him tribute, and half the luxury construction projects in southern Seoul existed because his signature had made them possible. He was the public face of a private empire, clean enough for boardrooms, feared enough for basements. But in front of his mother, he was still a son raised inside hierarchy so rigid it could suffocate love before a man knew he had any left. Madam Kang Hye-suk adjusted his tie without looking at him. Tonight is not about affection. It is about continuity. His jaw tightened. You said that when you pushed my divorce papers through the court. I said it when you failed to give this family an heir. Her tone was dry, almost bored, as if she were discussing a delayed shipment instead of a woman's life. Min-jae said nothing. That was his oldest habit when she wanted surrender. Silence shaped like permission. Behind them, Han So-yeon watched their reflection in the mirror with perfect posture and lowered lashes. She had elegance the kind of soul respected instantly. Educated, restrained, born to a political family that needed discreet protection and offered useful connections in return. She was the right bride for headlines. The safe bride. The strategic bride. And she knew exactly how to wear softness like a blade. She should be grateful you ended things cleanly, So-yeon said lightly. Most women attached to power don't leave with dignity. At the edge of Min-jae's restraint, something moved. Not anger, shame, because Amara had not left with dignity. She had left with a single suitcase, a bruised trust, and the knowledge that his mother had called her barren to her face in a room full of servants. The cruelest part was that Min-jae had been there. He had not repeated the insult. He had done something worse. He had allowed it. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Once. Twice. 3 times. He didn't need to look. He knew the number because he had spent 6 years pretending he did not still recognize it by instinct. Amara never called twice unless something was wrong. His mother's eyes dropped to the line of his jacket. Turn it off. He didn't move. Min-jae, she said, her voice softening into the tone she only used when control needed to sound maternal. A man who hesitates in front of everyone becomes weak in front of everyone. If you walk out tonight, the board will split. The prosecutors circling us will smell panic. Your enemies will test the gates before morning. You built too much to destroy it for a woman who could not secure your future. His phone kept vibrating. He thought of Amara's hands the first winter he brought her to his penthouse. Dark fingers wrapped around a porcelain teacup, eyes steady as she told him, I'm not afraid of your world. I'm afraid of what it asks you to become. He had kissed her then, because it was easier than answering. Now the phone went still. A strange quiet entered his chest, sharp enough to feel like warning. But warning came too late to men who had already chosen. He walked into the ballroom. Across the city, rain silvered the hospital windows. Amara lay curled around pain that rose and broke, and rose again. Sweat soaked the edges of her hairline. The nurse asked where the baby's father was, and she laughed once, a fractured sound that made the nurse stop writing. He's busy inheriting his mother's approval, she whispered. In the plastic folder beside her bed, sat the things she had managed to carry through the last months of humiliation. One passport, one lease agreement in a borrowed name, one folded ultrasound photo soft at the edges from being touched too often, and the plain platinum ring Min-jae had once slid onto her finger in a courthouse when he said he didn't need witnesses to know what he wanted. She had not sold it, though she had considered it the week rent was due. Not because of sentiment. Because letting it go felt too much like letting them rewrite what had happened. Another contraction ripped through her. She gripped the railing and breathed through the memory of the day everything broke. 3 months before this, she had stood in the Kang Mansion dining room with a teacup shaking in her hand, while Madame Kang reviewed her like a defective acquisition. "A wife enters a family to strengthen it," the older woman had said. "You entered mine and produced nothing." Amara had already known she was pregnant then. 6 weeks. She had found out that morning. She had planned to tell Min-jae first, privately, before the world that used lineage like a weapon could touch the news. But then So-yeon had arrived at lunch wearing a cream dress and a smile too polished to trust. By dessert, Madame Kang had placed photographs on the table. Min-jae leaving a clinic with So-yeon. Min-jae entering a hotel with So-yeon. So-yeon's hand on his arm. A headline draft not yet published. Amara had looked at him. "Tell me this is business." He had hesitated half a second too long. That hesitation had humiliated her more than any confession. "It became complicated," he had said. She remembered how still the room became after that, how the servants lowered their eyes, how Madame Kang lifted her teacup as if observing a performance she had financed. "You should leave before the press learns how embarrassing this has become," his mother said. Amara looked only at Min-jae. "Do you want me to go?" And because he was already thinking about damage control, alliances, succession, the men watching for instability, because power had trained him to calculate before feeling, he answered in the language of cowards. "For now. For now." 2 words, sharp enough to end a marriage. She had placed her ring on the table. Then, after 3 steps, she turned back, picked it up, and slid it into her pocket. Not for him. For the woman she would need to become after surviving him. Another contraction hit. The monitor screamed. Nurses moved faster. One of the babies dropped. Another's heartbeat flickered. The doctor appeared, calm in the way only experienced people could afford to be. "Ms. Johnson, I need you to listen to me. 3 babies means we do this with discipline. Stay with my voice." She nodded, though tears had begun to slip into her ears. Outside, in a hotel ballroom scented with orchids and money, Min-jae poured liquor for men he despised, bowed to elders he outgrew years ago, and stood beside a bride he could not love. So-yeon's hand rested lightly on his sleeve. Not possessive. Victorious. Then one of his captains approached from the side, breaking protocol. "Chairman." Min-jae turned. "What?" The man leaned closer. "We lost track of Madam, of Ms. Johnson 2 months ago. But one of our people just confirmed she was admitted to Haedong Women's Hospital tonight." For a second, the room blurred at the edges. "Why tonight?" The captain hesitated. "Labor, sir." The glass in Min-jae's hand cracked. Around him, conversations stuttered, then resumed too quickly, because everyone in that room understood what it meant when a man like Kang Min-jae forgot his surroundings. His mother stepped forward first. "You will not move." He looked at her as if he had never seen her clearly before. "Labor," he repeated. Madame Kang's expression never changed. If she wanted dignity, she should not have hidden. "She hid because you made staying impossible." His voice was low, but the danger in it changed the temperature of the air. So-yeon's grip tightened. "Min-jae, think." That was the phrase everyone used when they wanted him heartless. Think. Not feel. Not remember. Not choose rightly. Think. He removed So-yeon's hand from his arm. Carefully. Publicly. "Was she alone?" he asked. The captain answered, "Yes." It would have been easier if rage had taken him cleanly. Easier if he could blame only his mother, or So-yeon, or the machinery of bloodline and reputation that had built him into a polished weapon. But the truth entered with unbearable precision. Amara had called him. and he had let the phone ring. He left the ballroom to the sound of his mother saying his name like a command that had suddenly lost power. By the time he reached the hospital, the babies were already born. 3 premature cries had entered the world in a room too small for a betrayal that large. One little boy with a furious voice and clenched fists. Another quieter boy who slept against all the noise. A girl who opened her eyes immediately, as if born suspicious. Triplets. 3 children wrapped in striped blankets beneath warming lights. Amara looked gray with exhaustion, but when Minjai pushed through the door, whatever softness labor might have left in her disappeared. He stopped at the foot of her bed. The ultrasound photo lay on the tray beside her. The corner was damp from her hand. Her wedding ring rested on top of it, like a promise preserved only to be buried properly. His voice failed twice before it arrived. "You were pregnant." Her laugh was so weak it hurt more than if she had screamed. "Congratulations! You've finally met your missing heirs." He took 1 step forward. "Don't," she said. He obeyed. That was the first punishment. Not bullets. Not prison. Distance. The doctor entered with forms. The father's name for the birth certificates? Amara kept her eyes on Minjai. "Leave it blank." His head snapped up. "Amara. You left me alone to bring 3 children into the world while you married your mother's choice under chandeliers. Do not say my name like it still belongs in your mouth." He swallowed. "I can fix this." "No," she said quietly. "You can witness it. Fixing ended when I begged for truth and you gave me strategy. That should have been the end of it. In another story, she would have vanished before sunrise. But fate was crueler and more exacting than mercy. Because the births triggered records. Records triggered whispers. Whispers reached board members, legal advisors, enemy families, reporters. Within 48 hours, the underworld learned what Madame Kang had tried to erase. Kang Min-jae had not failed to produce heirs. He had abandoned them. The scandal was not that he had children. The scandal was that his mother had denied them for the sake of optics, and he had stood beside her while she did it. That was when punishment truly began. Stockholders in his legitimate businesses started asking quiet questions. One senior advisor resigned. A prosecutor reopened an inheritance-adjacent inquiry into offshore trusts. Internal rivals, smelling weakness, nudged at the edges of his authority. At home, Madame Kang responded the only way she knew how, by trying to seize control. She sent lawyers to the hospital with custody language disguised as family protection. Amara, pale and stitched with pain, read the documents once and handed them back. "If she wants my children," she told them, "she can try saying that to my face instead of through men in suits." Then she hired her own attorney. That was the second shock to the Kang family. Not that she fought. That she fought calmly. No public interviews. No emotional scenes. No revenge campaign. She rented a modest apartment on the north side of Seoul under legal protection, kept the triplets off social media, and refused every offer of money not tied to formal child support. When Min-jae's office sent an unlimited black card, she cut it in half and mailed it back with 1 sentence. "Children are not hush payments." When he requested access, she gave him terms through her lawyer. Supervised visits only. No photographs. No media exposure. No involvement from Madame Kang. No contact with Han So-yeon. And one more condition that made him sit in silence for a long time after reading it. If he missed even 1 scheduled visit for anything except death or hospitalization, access would be suspended for 30 days. Restricted access. He accepted immediately. The first visit took place in a family center with pale walls and toys too bright for his black suit. Min-jae arrived 10 minutes early and stood there like a man walking into judgment. Amara came in carrying the girl, while a caregiver wheeled the boys in their stroller. She did not greet him. "These are your children," she said with the precision of someone reading terms to a stranger. "June, Haru, Nia." He looked at them as if language itself had become inadequate. June, already alert, stared with direct accusation. Haru blinked sleepily, one fist under his chin. Nia clutched Amara's sweater and watched everything. Minjai lowered himself slowly to the floor. "Hello," he said, and for the first time in years he sounded unsure of his own voice. The children did not know what he had destroyed, which made them kinder than any adult in the room. For weeks, he came exactly on time. Then early. Then with his phone off, his guards waiting outside. He learned how Haru only slept if someone tapped the stroller twice. He learned June hated cold milk. He learned Nia calmed when she held fabric in her fist, usually the edge of Amara's sleeve. He said little, did much. Trial upgrade came 3 months later when one of the twins spiked a fever during a visit, and Minjai did not call staff, assistants, or nurses first. He carried the child himself, ran beside the gurney, sat in the pediatric emergency room until dawn in yesterday's clothes, and signed nothing that would expose them to press. When Amara arrived, hair unbound and panic held tightly behind her teeth, she found him heating a bottle badly and reading medication instructions 3 times. She stopped in the doorway. "He's sleeping now," Minjai said, standing. "The doctor wants to monitor his lungs for 6 more hours." She stared at him as if comparing this man to the one she had buried. "You stayed?" "Yes." He could have said more. He didn't. That was the first correct thing he had done without needing to be taught. Later, when dawn made the hospital glass glow silver, Amara sat across from him with coffee neither of them drank. "What changed?" she asked. He answered with the honesty pain had finally beaten into him. "I ran out of lies that let me live with myself." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was clean. Months passed. Winter turned. The triplets grew round-cheeked and opinionated. Minjai moved through the trust phases the only way Amara allowed, through consistency so boring it became sacred. He never missed a visit, never asked for shortcuts, never tried to charm her lawyer, pressure a judge, or weaponize his influence. When tabloids circulated rumors that he had an illegitimate hidden family, he issued no denial. When reporters asked if the children were his, he said, "My private life is under legal protection," and took the damage instead of dragging their names into the open. Then came inner life access. Nia fell asleep on his chest one rainy afternoon in Amara's apartment, while June dismantled a toy truck and Haru drooled on his tie. Amara returned from the kitchen and found the scene unchanged 10 minutes later. Minjai had not moved for fear of waking her. "Her favorite song is the one with the piano," Amara said quietly from the doorway. He looked up. It was the first piece of unnecessary information she had given him. Not logistics, not conditions. Life. After that came other small openings. Which medicine June refused unless mixed with banana puree? Which blanket Haru called his moon blanket? Which children's book made Nia angry because the ending felt unfair? He learned the shape of their days, the sounds of their home, the place on Amara's bookshelf where the old ultrasound photo still lived behind 2 novels, untouched but not thrown away. Then the final test came, the one that had nothing to do with children and everything to do with whether he would still choose them under pressure. Madame Kang suffered a minor stroke during a board dispute and emerged from recovery more vicious than fragile. Facing succession panic, she announced a formal family dinner and leaked it to the press, intending to present Minjai beside her as a dutiful son and to erase the scandal through choreography. She also arranged for Han So-yeon to attend, wearing the engagement necklace she had never returned. "If you embarrass me now," Madame Kang told him, seated upright in her hospital suite like an empress among machines, "you will fracture this family permanently." Minjai looked at the woman who had shaped him through discipline, fear, and reward, withheld just long enough to stay powerful. "It was already fractured," he said. "You were simply the last to admit it." "You would disgrace your own mother for that woman?" For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "I disgraced myself when I let you destroy my wife and children to protect a name that deserved to be broken." That night, instead of attending the family dinner, he appeared in front of the mansion gates, where reporters waited in the cold. Beside him stood not a mistress, not a politically useful bride, but Amara. Only because he had asked, and only because she chose this battle for the children. Not for him. She wore no ring, no borrowed softness, just a dark coat straight shoulders, and the calm expression of a woman who had survived worse than cameras. Madame Kang, furious, came out to stop them. So-yeon followed, face pale with disbelief. The microphones rose like weapons. Min-jae did something no one in Seoul expected. He bowed to Amara first. Not romantically, publicly, formally. Deep enough for every camera to catch the truth of it. When he straightened, his voice carried with lethal steadiness. There will be no marriage to Han So-yeon. There has been no rightful place in my life, except the family I failed. Any disrespect shown to Ms. Johnson or our children will be treated as disrespect to me. Gasps, flashbulbs, panic. His mother stepped forward. You ungrateful. No, he said, and the single word stopped even her. Not this time. So-yeon let out a brittle laugh. After everything, you think one speech repairs betrayal? Amara answered before he could. It doesn't. Then she looked at the cameras, at the gates, at the empire that had once tried to swallow her whole. But truth on record is a start. That was the full public commitment test under pressure, and he passed. Not because it won her back, because he finally chose the right cost. Years did what dramatic apologies never could. They made patterns visible. Min-jae bought no forgiveness. He built routines. School pickups when his security schedule allowed. Doctor appointments. Parent-teacher meetings attended in simple coats, not convoy theatrics. He moved Madame Kang out of any trust structure touching the children and placed independent legal protections under Amara's oversight. He cut off So-yeon's family contracts despite the financial backlash. When rivals tried to use the triplets as leverage in whispers, he responded so decisively that no one tried again. He softened, but not into weakness. Into usefulness. The children grew old enough to ask difficult questions. Why don't you live here? June asked once, sprawled on the rug with blocks. Min-jae looked at Amara before answering. She gave a slight nod. Because I made choices that hurt your mother, he said. And when you hurt people, you don't get to decide how fast they trust you again. Haru considered this seriously. So, you're in timeout? For the first time, Amara laughed in front of him without pain leading it. Yes, Min-jae said. A very long one. Nia climbed into his lap anyway. That was the kind of mercy children gave without understanding the cost. By the time the triplets turned 5, Seoul had learned a new story about Kang Min-jae. Not that he had become gentle. He hadn't. Men still feared disappointing him. Deals still bent when he entered a room. But now there were 3 small chairs in a private dining room of his office, 3 drawings pinned inside a safe wall behind ledgers and contracts, and 1 framed ultrasound photo in the bottom drawer of his desk, hidden where only he could see the first evidence of what he had once failed to protect. On the anniversary of the night they were born, he went with Amara to the hospital roof after the children fell asleep in her apartment. The city below glittered, Seoul polished and restless, bridges lit like promises no one should trust too easily. He handed her a small velvet box. She looked at him, then opened it. Inside was the plain platinum ring she had once kept through ruin. Not repaired. Resized. The scratches preserved. I found it when your lawyer returned the rest of the old court documents, he said. I had no right to hold it, but I wanted to give it back properly. Amara stared at the ring for a long moment. Then she closed the box and placed it between them on the bench. Not acceptance, not rejection, just truth. He nodded once, understanding. Below them, ambulances moved like thin lines of light. Life beginning, ending, changing shape in rooms where no amount of power could negotiate with pain. What would you have done in her place? The story asks, because some betrayals do not leave one clean answer behind. Would you have vanished forever? Would you have let him near the children? Would you have believed steady hands after catastrophic failure? Amara finally spoke. I don't love you the way I did before. He looked out at the river. I know. That woman is gone. I know. But sometimes, she said carefully, when the children run to the door and you're standing there, I think maybe what's left can still be honest. Min-jae closed his eyes briefly, as if even that small grace hurt. Honest is more than I deserve. Probably, she said. He almost smiled. A cold wind moved over the rooftop. She opened the velvet box again, touched the ring once, then slid it onto a chain around her neck instead of her finger. A small, symbolic gesture. Not wife, not stranger, not erased. Something in between, where bittersweet lives. When they went downstairs, the triplets were tangled together on the sofa beneath one blanket. 3 impossible little proofs that bloodline had not been missing, only denied. Minjae lifted Haru carefully. Amara carried Nia. June, half awake, reached for both of them at once. And for the first time, no one in the room pretended family had to look perfect to be real. Some losses never reverse. Some love stories do not earn a fairy tale. Sometimes redemption is not getting the woman back, but becoming the kind of man who can finally be trusted with the truth of what he broke. And sometimes that is the only ending powerful enough to last. Subscribe to Midnight Love Saga for more stories like this, and tell me in the comments, did he deserve another chance? Or was Amara already kinder than he had any right to ask for?